Hello, everybody, and welcome to this presentation with Amniotics and the CEO, Kåre Enkilde. And today we are going to focus on Kåre Enkilde's and the company's Q3 report. Welcome to you, Kåre, and welcome to the audience. I would like to post a couple of practical issues. If you want to ask Kåre about something, just post your question in the chat and I will forward it to Kåre. Let's go on, Kåre, and welcome.
Thank you, Klaus. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for the opportunity here to present Amniotics as we see it as a very, very cool company, still at a young stage, but really as we see it looking very much forward to growing very much. So if we look at you could say a little update on how we progress. Well, our programs are generally progressing quite well. If we recall, we're the type of, you could say, a platform company where we have mesenchymal stem cells from the amniotic fluid for 4 different indications or 4 different tissues. We have the lung, the skin, the kidney, and the brain. So really targeting some of these very, you could say, big markets. We have a planned clinical trial within acute respiratory distress syndrome / COVID-19 to start in 2022. It's presently really well on track. We have successfully manufactured the clinical batches for this upcoming trial. We also strengthen the organization within medical and clinical and regulatory affairs. And you could say, if we look at it, the pandemic is certainly far from over. But I would also, you could say, point to that our product is not going for the antiviral part. Our product is going for the hospitalized patients where we have a cytokine storm. Hence, it's a different type of product. It's used for something different, and therefore it's much more open, you could say, moving forward into other indications. If we look at the financials, maybe we'll have a little chat on that later on. But really much, you could say, spending and cash flow are really much according to plan. But we should dwell a little into the respiratory indication or clinical trial we are planning. We have the PulmoStem product. It's a mesenchymal stem cell product from amniotic fluid taken from plant C-sections, which is selected for its lung specificity. And we have shown that it is anti-inflammatory, it's anti-fibrotic, and it also have a biomarker relevance for the lung. We can also see that's the biodistribution for which it targets. So what we are aiming for here is what's called a phase 1, phase 2, where we're targeting the classical endpoints of safety and tolerability. But we're also very much looking, of course, to efficacy in preventing and development of the disease, you could say progressing and maybe even reduce mortality later on. And we are assessing the dynamic of potential efficacy biomarkers at some of these pre-specific times. So we're targeting both, you could say, inflammatory markers, fibrotic markers, and even some of these fatigue setups. You could say many of post-COVID patients often speak about fatigue, lack of energy due to fibrotic tissue in the lungs. Quite often can also be, you could say, due to other reasons, but often that's part of that. So also trying to assess fatigue post-COVID in this setup.
Well, you can also, sorry, Kåre, and this indication is very interesting because do you have some data as of today how many post-COVID patients in terms of your product are addressable?
That's a very difficult question to answer. Yeah. You could say also because if we look at the countries, there's very different scenarios of how many post-COVID patients there are. Denmark do not seem to have a lot, but if we compare to some of the other countries, quite a lot of the patients who have had COVID still suffers quite a lot from post-COVID syndrome. So there really seems to be a big difference in countries and regions. While some countries report, say, 15% of those that have had severe COVID to still have post-COVID symptoms up to a year later, other countries report much lower numbers. So it's very difficult to exactly say what that will be. But you could say there is certainly a market also for post-COVID and trying to set that up. And in that setting, I would say it's probably also somewhat comparable to what we would see in acute respiratory distress syndrome, where there's inflammation of the lungs and the risk of fibrotic tissue in the lungs moving forward.
Yeah, because you address this in Oh, well, I could put the question a little different, because in your report as of today, but you mentioned that for me earlier on, the FDA actually made a special program for coronavirus treatment, and maybe you could elaborate a little on that, and what will it take for you to enter that pool of money or focus?
Yeah, you could say the FDA has what, if I recall correctly, it's called warp speed. Really, you could say trying to move products very fast forward. EMA kind of have the same with a rolling procedure where they have a rolling approval of products within these indications. And that's the reason why we've seen the vaccines treatments coming so quickly forward. And also some of the other products are really quickly moving forward within emergency use. And I would say Pulmostem, following this trial, could potentially also take the same route and quickly move into later phases by still using some of these fast-track approval processes that are in place still.
Oh, interesting. And Kåre, how many patients are you going to enroll? So I know you're going to file for the application before New Year.
Hopefully, I would say we are targeting first patient in first half next year.
Yeah.
So that is really much what we are focusing on and getting that rolling. We have many of the documents ready. We need consistency checks of these and getting them all prepped and ready. We are also targeting different countries, and that's the reason why you could say I'm not so extremely direct on that part, because different countries have different timelines for the setups and have different requirements on that. But that's part of how we work it. We have several different countries. We have several different clinical sites enabling, you could say, continuous and working within this field. What I think is also very interesting here and important here is to focus on that we are, you would say, on the low level, we have at least 9 patients. On the high level, we have at least 18 patients. So to understand what we have is called what an adaptive trial design, where we have the ability both to escalate and de-escalate in the dose level. And that means that we can already now start finding the correct dose and quickly do a rollover into a phase 2b study. And that, you could say, is the way we try to target this, enabling to move very quickly forward in such a setting, because that means that we can enroll more patients on the dose that we evaluate will be the right dose for the next studies.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, and then finally, I would like to ask you about one of the strengths that Amniotics actually have is that you have a larger part of the value chain compared to competitors or other players within gene and stem cell technologies, because you actually own your own GMP production, and that leads me to, first of all, the current project entering phase 1, but also your different projects. Would you like to elaborate a little on that, Kåre?
Certainly, and I think you're really putting the head on the nail there, because I tend to say that Amniotics is a very unique company, because we both have a medtech device part. Many medtechs only medtech. We have a medtech as well for sourcing the amniotic fluid from plant sections. So we have a device that is CE marked and patented for that. Then, as you mentioned, we have the full manufacturing setup, and many companies only have that. Then you have a contract manufacturing setup. We have that, enabling us to produce at the right time and producing all the products ourselves. That, of course, enables us to move quickly forward. It also enables us to continue producing more and more IP around our processes. And we've built it in a way that we can have more lines going at the same time. So we are not, you could say, need that we can only produce one product. We can produce one of our products, say the Pulmostem, as we've done right now, while we still continue to produce for our CogniStem for neuronal indications, our QT-Stem for dermatology indications, and so forth, enabling us really to quickly move forward in this space. And even, you can say, also with the potential to, as a secondary business, to work for other companies as a contract manufacturer.
Well, thanks a lot. And well, right now there's not any questions from the audience, but I would like to finish the session with a final question here, Kåre, regarding your funding, because you made a right issue this summer, and you actually received 60 million Swedish. And could you just for the new public to your company elaborate a little on what they are earmarked for?
Certainly. And they are very much earmarked for the clinical study and clinical trials. This is really, you could say, where we take the next step as a company, growing and moving that forward. Because my experience from being in big pharma and so forth is that if you really want those big and good deals with big pharma, you need the clinical data. You need to prove that you are a company that's able to move into the clinical space. So that's very important for us to get that. So that is what most of that rights issue have been used for and will be used for. And of course, also continue building the company, because we are very much also thought of as a platform company that can focus and develop products for many different indications and many different tissues. Because as you could say, Pulmostem here for acute respiratory distress syndrome and COVID-19 and so forth can also go potentially for other indications, such as pulmonary fibrosis, lung transplantation, and so forth. Some of these diseases that we know that are driven by inflammation and fibrotic tissues and fibrosis in those tissues.
Well, I don't know if there's any questions out there. Seems like that. Good. Kåre, I would like to thank you for the good presentation. And for the audience, I would like to say thanks a lot. First of all, we are going to post the interview with Kåre and Amniotics on our YouTube channel, but we will also post it on our Spotify channel, and I think Kåre will be one of the first on that channel. So with that, I would like to thanks everybody and have a really nice weekend.